Hey folks, I'm Sir Vainglory, and this is my 10th Anatomy of a Battle video. This is a 1v1 ranked battle between the 15th Infantry Division and the 116th Panzer on the Merderet map. It's good to come up against somebody who wasn't playing with the 3rd Fallschirmjäger for a change, so I'm quite looking forward to this battle. So in terms of the map, it's a good map for infantry, but there is a need to guard against armour advancing on the flanks, particularly on the right hand side where there's a bit more open ground. So my plan is to get a large infantry force with mortar support to secure the centre of the map and use my 6-pounders to defend the flanks. So I'm going to push infantry up through the woods and secure enough ground to get control of the map. And I also want to make use of P8 teams to help the infantry deal with half-tracks and any light armour. So to start with, my main force, infantry force, moving up from the left hand side here. There's also a recce section, P8 section, and I think there's a 6-pounder somewhere around there. Heading up the left. On the right hand side we've got the same again, recce 6-pounder, P8 team. We've also got an infantry squad and a Vickers heavy machine gun heading out to the right. In the centre we have I think 4 infantry squads, a P8 team, and Dingo command car. And I want to keep things pretty tight this time around. I don't want to go out to the very extreme flanks, so just staying within that sort of boundary limit that we've established there. So the first contact's on the right. We have a 6-pounder, get us a couple of shots off against a half-track. Doesn't manage to get it, it pulls back, so the gun then swings round to the right and targets a Panzer III, and it takes it out first time. So it's a good start, got myself established now, and there hasn't been any early rush by the Germans, so I reckon that my opponent will play conservatively. So I push my recce section on each flank forward through the trees just to get better vision, see what we're facing. And looking back now, I think my Vickers on the right hand side here is way too far back. I should have had it further forward, maybe with the infantry in the woods to the right, or even the tree line further forward. But in that position there, it's ineffective, and I do move it up later. But I now do have decent vision forward on the left and in the centre, so I begin moving my infantry forward. And this is the first time I've come up against the 116th Panzer, and I'm not entirely sure what I'll be facing. I do expect to encounter Sturm Pioneer though, and I'm wary about advancing through the wood in the centre, although I do have a command car there to buff the infantry morale. Another German half-track spotted advancing up this main road on the right, and the 6-pounder waits patiently, but the half-track pulls off the road just as it fires. I've called another 2-inch mortar in to support the infantry in the centre, and also want to get more recce troops out to the right flank, so that's the first reinforcements that I call in. And the recce troops on the left spot a Panzer Grenadier squad in the woods ahead of them, so we've now got an idea of where the Germans are lining up. Another half-track moves up this main road on the right hand side again, but this one pulls off into the field before coming in range of the 6-pounder. Now the recce section on the right now spots a Panzer Grenadier squad, but they're not detected. And I'm now beginning to push my infantry in the centre forward through the trees. I don't plan on moving them into the open yet, just try to get a sense of what we might be facing. I expect the Germans will have an MG42 or a sniper or something like that in the buildings, probably with more behind. But over on the right hand side now, the German starts to bring in artillery fire. I don't think the units are visible, but he's probably assuming that the anti-tank gun's still somewhere around there, so he's firing blind, I think. I've now moved up my infantry on the extreme right in the Vickers, and I've also brought up a recce section there. In the centre we've spotted a half-track behind the buildings, so I'm certain that the buildings will be defended themselves, and I keep my squads in the trees for now, as I plan to bring up more infantry to the right hand side, so we can push from both flanks. But for now I'm bringing up infantry to reinforce the left flank where I've got a clear ground to move up, and I'm also bringing in a 2-inch mortar on the right hand side. My Vickers heavy machine gun had moved up into the tree line there, and it immediately started to engage the Panzer Grenadier squad by the main road. And as a result of that, you can see artillery fire started to fall on it. So, having had it too far back, I now probably should have left it just behind the trees until I saw more of an advantage, because it ends up getting wiped out by the artillery. On the left hand side, I push a machine gun carrier forward behind the trees up to support the recce section and just project the zone of control a bit further before I move up my infantry. And on the right, I start to drop mortar fire on the Panzer Grenadiers that I can see there. It's just in preparation for advancing. And I also push the recce section on the far right forward through the trees to get me better vision of that flank. So the Panzer Grenadiers take a few mortar rounds and then they withdraw. And with that being done, I then retask the mortar to fire on the German artillery, a bit of counter battery fire. I now start moving forward the infantry on the left. I've got a couple of squads coming in to reinforce the centre, and I also call in more infantry for the right hand side. So you can see, all I can see at the moment, a couple of infantry squads and half-track. I've now got a Churchill moving in towards the centre with infantry reinforcements on the right, where we've spotted that German recce section moving forward. My infantry on the left moves forward and engages the Panzer Grenadiers in the tree line ahead of them. And a third squad I'm sending round to the right there to try go up through the trees and get into a flanking position. So again, the 2-star infantry are pretty difficult to break down their morale. The infantry reinforcements in the centre and the right are now moving up, as you can see. We've also got another P8 team coming in on the right hand side there. On the left, the half-track moves forward to support this Panzer Grenadier squad at the same time as I move my machine gun carrier out to attack them. And my 6-pounder there targets the half-track and forces it to fall back. There are more vehicles in the area though, and when they move forward the 6-pounder engages them too. The Panzer Grenadiers are holding up well, as you'd expect, but we've got a couple of squads and a couple of MG carriers there, so we're beginning to wear them down. I'm beginning to push the infantry reinforcements on the right in towards the centre, and they encounter a Panzer Grenadier squad, and I think this is the one that I mortared earlier on. They engage in a firefight there, and I pull my machine gun carrier back to avoid it getting taken out by a Panzerfaust. And I call in fire from both mortars, because the infantry's not going to be able to take down the Panzer Grenadiers by themselves. So with 2 mortars raining shells on them, they quickly pin down and then they surrender to the one guy with the P8. But you can see that the German artillery is coming in now and suppressing my units. Back on the left, there's a Panzer III moved up off the road behind the trees to avoid my anti-tank gun, and it moved towards my troops with a half-track in support, and I kick myself for leaving the P8 team so far back. My rifle squads are now beginning to become pinned down themselves, but I do have just enough left to force the Panzer Grenadier squad to fall back from their position in the trees. The left flank clearly needs support, so I send the Churchill over in that direction. On the right, my infantry has weathered the artillery fire as the barrage ends. But the Panzer III on the left hasn't actually engaged my infantry, and they're slowly recovering their morale, so I'll leave things be there while I wait for the Churchill to get on the scene. In the centre, I begin pushing the infantry forward now that I've got infantry to move up on the right hand side. And I make sure that the Dingo command car is going to be close enough to support them. So I'm still waiting to see what the Germans have in there. Over on the right, the Mirillis Action engages one of my rifle squads, and then the Germans call an infantry fire on the infantry as well. Now what looks like an SPW 234/3, a scout car with a 75mm cannon spotted moving up on the right flank by my recce troops. It spots my MG carrier at the end of the tree line and fires on it, forcing it to fall back. So I call in mortar fire on the recce squad and order my machine gun carriers to target it too. The carriers both move out to the main road and one's destroyed straight away by a pack. The second machine gun carrier for some reason then charges forward, taking shots from the pack which fortunately miss it, and it begins to fall back. So I think it survives 3 wild shots, and then right at the point where it's about to draw behind cover, it's taken out. Over on the left hand side, the half-track appears. That's in line of sight of my 6-pounder. The gun gets a shot off and half-track pulls back. The other half-track engages my machine gun carrier, and they decide to risk moving the 6-pounder forward along the tree line to try and get a shot in the Panzer III there. But the Panzer III spots the gun as it's preparing to fire, and it's able to suppress it quickly. So the gun doesn't manage to get a shot off, and the Panzer III wipes out the crew. The machine gun carrier continues to fire on the half-track, which is pulled back. On the right hand side, I've brought in a Honey Stewart that engages the SPW 234, and the SPW doesn't fancy that contest and it immediately pulls back into the cover of the trees with the Honey pushing up after it. Left, we've got a couple of P8 teams now moving up to try and get in range of the light vehicles that are over there. I'm now bringing in a Challenger on the left to support the units there, and I've also moved the Churchill out from cover. You can see there's a half-track recovering its morale there to the left hand side, and the Churchill spots that and engages it, and then the Challenger moves up and gets in range and finishes it off. In the centre, I begin to move up in the chateau and we uncover an MG42. I've got plenty of squads facing it, but the half-track to the rear moves up as well to support the machine gun, and the German also brings in artillery fire from the right. Over on the left, I have the Challenger and the Churchill and the Honey Stewart together, and I've started to push the infantry forward as well. German artillery is now coming in on the tanks, and I begin pushing them forward to the left of the trees. As the tanks move up there, the Honey Stewart gets a shot off in the Panzer III and takes it out. Over on the right, I've brought in a Wolverine, and it's engaging the Panzer IV that's up there, along with the Honey. Honey's in the fight as well, and they force it to fall back. And Opel Blitz that was coming in behind the Panzer comes straight into the line of sight, and that's engaged as well. So back in the centre, the half-track falls back, and the machine gun also falls back. I'm suspicious there that he's trying to draw me into a trap, so I just stay put for the moment. And over on the left, we finally spot the German infantry in the trees, and it's the remains of the Panzer Grenadier squad from earlier. There's also a SPA troop section a bit further back. The infantry and the vehicles open up the Panzer Grenadiers, and with the weight of fire that they bring to bear, they quickly suppress them and force them to fall back. The more advanced infantry is fired on by the SPA troop and a couple of half-tracks, and I pull those troops back a bit into the cover of the trees. And the Panzer Grenadier squad, having recovered morale, it reappears in the trees where it was, and it's immediately engaged again by the infantry and the vehicles, and this time it's finally eliminated. So we also managed to temporarily force back the SPA troop, but the infantry is still suffering from MG fire of the half-tracks, and there's an MG appeared in the trees to the right. Over on the right hand side, it's gone quiet, and I've started pushing my Wolverine and Honey Stuart forward to hunt for the Panzer IV. They both stopped to engage the SPA troop in the centre there, while the Panzer and the SPW both reappear and target my machine gun carrier, forcing it back on the right. So that machine gun carrier falls back, the SPA trooper pinned, and they go to ground. So my next objective is to clear out the trees that straddle the main road on the right, so I've called in half a dozen rifle squads to help me do that. As they move up, a Pak 38 is spotted and it fires in the trucks, suppresses a couple of squads, and they have to bail out, and I order all the infantry into the fields on either side of the road. Over on the left, we've still got this long range battle going on between the Honey Stuart and the half-track, but the half-track is forced to fall back. And my Challenger spots a Panzer IV moving up in the exchange of a few shots. The Challenger manages to suppress a Panzer, and it falls back, and the Churchill joins the engagement, and then the Challenger knocks it out. On the right, I've got my mortar targeting the Pak, the main road, but there's another Panzer IV appeared and engaged the Honey Stuart. I've brought up a second Wolverine, and I send them to try and deal with the first Panzer IV. The Honey Stuart's knocked out by one Panzer, and the other decides to withdraw rather than face the two Wolverines. And the new Panzer's a command tank though, giving the other one an extra star, and it engages the Wolverines and destroys one of them. But I've called in a Typhoon, and it hits the Panzer and forces it to fall back. And the German calls in an ME-109, but it's never going to catch the Typhoon from that range. So it's quiet across the rest of the front for now. I've got another Churchill moving in the left flank, and my infantry on the right is getting into position to clear the trees by the main road. The MG42 reappears in the buildings in the centre, and the firefight there continues. I don't know what I was doing with my mortars at this point. We've also got the ME-109 continuing to fly about and strafe my units. The SPA troop reappear on the left, and I push infantry forward to take them out. And we're eventually able to do that. Over on the right side, the Command Panzer and the SPW 234 are pushing forward. The Panzer IV engages my Wolverine and takes it out. And then they both turn to face the MG carrier that's out in the far right. And between them they drive that back and then destroy it. In the centre I've finally got my mortars laying fire in the chateau, and the MG42 is beginning to suffer. I've lost a couple of men. My P8 teams all I've got left, covering the right flank here, and it's now facing the Panzers and the Scout Car and Infantry Squad. Everything shoots at it and eliminates it there. My 6-pounder destroys a half-track in the main road, and then switches targets to the Panzer IV. It damages the tracks with its first shot, and it gives it time for another couple of rounds on it, which eventually takes it out. And since there was an ME-109 flying around earlier, I've brought in a Crusader to cover the centre, and I'm also bringing in a 25-pounder for heavier fire support on the right. And I've pushed a couple of rifle squads over to the right flank just to give me some presence there, and again give me an idea of what's potentially going on. The SPW and the Panzer IV and the Panzer Grenadiers all stopped to engage the infantry, which is actually ideal. My concern had been that they would just push past up that flank, bypass my troops and close down on my reinforcements. Over on the left I'm pushing tentatively forward, looking out for packs, which is just as well because there's one at extreme range that takes out a machine gun carrier. My infantry are still engaged with the half-tracks behind the forest, and the P manages to take out one of them. One of my squads on the right is wiped out, and this SPW and Panzer begin to push forward again. The 6-pounder spots them and dispatches the SPW before it engages the tank. The German commander tries to take out the gun with artillery and a strafing run by the ME-109, but the gun manages to kill the Panzer before it's destroyed itself. In the centre I've now got the 25-pounder targeting the chateau, and it's managed to drive back the MG42, and the fire eventually wipes it out. So I'm beginning to push my infantry forward a bit further now. So over on the right flank there appears to be little facing me now that I've wiped out those vehicles. I know that there's a Panzer Grenadier squad in the trees by the rail track, and there's artillery beyond the trees in front of me, but that appears to be it, so I begin to push my squad forward up through the trees there. And then we spot another Panzer heading our way in the right flank, and a couple of half-tracks in the fields beyond the trees. Panzer Grenadiers eventually come out of that forest, and they begin heading towards my rifle squad, but their morale takes a pounding as they rush across the open ground there. And by the time they get close in, they eventually just break and they surrender. But my own infantry, as it's moving up, it encounters a Sturm Pioneer squad, and there's also half-track firing on them there. So as they push forward after the Sturm Pioneers, the predictable happens. So my squad surrenders. We've spotted another Sturm Pioneer squad over in the left flank, but we're out of range of a flamethrower and able to pin it down with machine gun fire. I move up Churchill to get line of sight on the pack at the far end of the village, and it's able to pin it down with a couple of shots. The Challenger also got a shot in on it there. I've now brought in a second 25-pounder and had them both target the chateau to drive back that half-track, and it falls back, leaving the buildings clear, and I now push my infantry in to take control of the centre of the map. So my main concern now is the right flank, where I know there's a tank on the loose with little to oppose it. I'm bringing in a 17-pounder down in the right there to cover the open ground to the right of the rail track, and to prevent the German artillery from suppressing it, I retasked my 25-pounders to counter battery fire. The pack on the left has recovered its morale, but as soon as it prepares to fire, it's targeted and destroyed by the Churchill. And with that threat eliminated, I suspect it will be safe to push the armour further forward. I've also got a fresh recce section moving up to provide some vision on that flank. A Panzer IV appears from behind the trees on the right flank, moving along the railway track. It engages the rifle squad, and then it engages the machine gun carrier, or the 2-inch mortar, as it charges down that track. There's also a half-track coming down the main road on the right. I think the Germans are trying to sweep round my flank there and take out my artillery. But the Panzer spotted by the 17-pounder as soon as it gets in line of sight, and at that range it's an easy kill for the gun. The 17-pounder then swings around to target the half-track in the road, and it takes a couple of shots to deal with that. I've been so intent on the right flank for a bit that I've not moved forward my recce on the left, and a Panther G now appears and targets one of my Churchills, taking it out first time. I still got my Challenger in left and it's screened off by trees, so I'm happy to leave it there and check any advance. I've got a couple of rifle squads moving up to protect the tank from an infantry assault. So I've now got control of the centre of the map. There's a few German units pushing forward on the right. My 25 pounders are continue to disrupt their artillery, and my infantry takes out a Sturm Pioneer squad, but then it's hit from very close range by a grill. I've shifted my 17 pounder slightly to the right to try and get line of sight in the grill, and I've got a couple of Wolverines coming in to shore up that flank. It's quite fortuitous that I had sent the 17 pounder over to the right, because the German commander brings in a GU-88 which runs a gauntlet of fire to attack the location that my 17 pounder has just left. Although the size of the bombs is still close enough to the strike that it gets suppressed. Just briefly though. Over on the left, the Panzer G is pushing forward towards the crossroads to engage my infantry, and a Sturm Pioneer squad appears in the trees by my Challenger. Luckily the Sturm Pioneers were easily suppressed. I fired from the rifles and the Challenger itself, but my own infantry begins to take a beating from the Panther. A self-propelled gun, probably a Vesp, that was being pushed forward is spotted by the Churchill behind the woods and taken out. And it now looks like the Germans are building up to push on the left, so I've got my 25 pounders target the half-tracks that I can see, and I also call in a Typhoon to target the Panther. So it unloads its rockets and forces the Panther to fall back, just as it was about to engage my Challenger. And again the German brings in the ME-109, but there's no chance of it catching up with the Typhoon. So another SPW 234/3 arrives in the main road and it engages my infantry, but I've got a P8 team nearby and it manages to take out the scout car. Back on the left, the Sturm Pioneers have recovered their morale and go back after the Challenger, but my rifles are suppressed after being fired on by the Panther, but the Honey Stuart helps to drive off the German attack. My Wolverines get into line of sight on the grill by the rail track and take it out. And with that being done, that lets me move up my 17 pounder in relative safety. On the left hand side, the Panther moves forward again, engages my Challenger. The Challenger gets the first shot in, but I don't think it's worth the risk of losing it, so I pull it back into cover rather than engage in a straight out fight. I've still got the Churchill in a position where it might be able to get a flank shot in the Panther, and I've also got a 6 pounder moving up. On the right hand side, Sturm Pioneer squad and the half track appear in the orchard by the main road on the right, where the P8 team is most furthest forward. The P8 team holds its ground and manages to destroy the half track with its second shot. And on the left, the half track appears by the orchard, takes fire from the rifle squad and the Honey Stuart, and it surrenders to the infantry. But the Challenger and the Panther resume their duel, and again I pull my tank back. Unfortunately, as it reverses, it moves out of cover and into the Panther's line of sight. It takes a hit that damages its transmission, and then the Panther's second shot is enough to wipe it out. And around the same time that that's happening, a second Panzer G appears over in the right flank where I've been pushing my Wolverines forward. So it takes out one of my Wolverines straight away, and the second one returns fire, but it's clearly outmatched, so I send it in towards cover. And my 17 pounder's now in the trees by the rail track, and I'm fairly confident that I'll be able to deal with the Panther if I can lure it into the gun's line of sight. The Panther almost wins the race to get sight of the Wolverine, but I do manage to get it in behind cover of the trees just in time, and then I bring in a Typhoon to go after the Panther. And again, the rocket attack is enough to force the Panther to fall back. And again, ME-109 comes in. On the left is some Pioneer squad, or what's left, attacks what's left of the Rifle squad, but the Rifles destroy the Pioneers. And it's a bit difficult to work out what happens, but I think they then surrender to the Panther. On the right hand side, after the Typhoon attack, I'd moved the Wolverine out to try and get a rear shot on the retreating Panther, but I couldn't get line of sight, and it's now out in the open firing at the ME-109 as the Panther heads back into the fight. I bring in a pair of Spitfires to try and take out the ME-109, but the Germans are 2-star aircraft against 1-star aircraft. The 109 evacuates, but both of my aircraft are forced to fall back by anti-aircraft fire, so the ME-109 gets away. So it looks now like the Panther is the only unit the Germans still have on the left, and I have a couple of Churchills and a command Churchill all in that area, so I'm happy to just contain it where it is and let it make a move. So German doesn't seem to have very much. We've controlled plenty of the map now, so quite comfortable in this position. But the Wolverine on the right has been falling back after taking fire from the Panther, and when its morale recovers, it resumes its orders to head for cover in the trees and run straight into the Panther's line of sight. So I haven't really had a good target from my 25 pounders for a while, so I set them to shell the mobile wagon that drove off the Spitfires, as I'm planning to bring in a Typhoon to attack the Panther again. So a couple of rounds in from each of the 25 pounders is enough to force the mobile wagon to retreat. And meanwhile, over on the left, the Panther moves forward into the line of sight of my 6-pounder that's being buffed by the command tank, gets an extra star. So a shot at quite close range is enough to take out the tank side armour as well. But the frontline marker isn't that affected by the destruction of the Panther, so I now know that the Germans still have something else in that vicinity. Over on the right, the 25 pounders have forced the mobile wagon to fall back towards the Panther. So on the left, the Germans bring in a Ju-88 again. This time it targets my 6-pounder. And again, 500 kilogram bombs. Managed to take out the gun and force the Churchill to fall back. I bring in my Typhoon on the right to attack the Panther again, and again it forces it to withdraw. And again, ME-109 comes in. So this time I wait until ME-109's over my territory, and then I call in the Spitfires to try and catch it. This time he doesn't have his own AA gun to help him out. So this dogfight goes on for quite some time. They just aren't able to get a bead on each other. So the AI obviously can't handle aircraft tactics. When you've got 2 against 1, you should be able to get at least one into position for a shot. But the Spitfires eventually take some damage from the anti-aircraft gun, and I pull them out. On the ground, a couple of Panzer Grenadier squads have been rushed forward on the right into contact with my infantry at the rail track, and there's a Panzer IV following them in. My 25 pounders are still targeting that location though, but one of the infantry squads does surrender, and then my own infantry squad surrenders to the half track before it falls back. But as it falls back, it moves into line of sight of my 17-pounder, and it's destroyed. So another of my squads has been shelled by a German mortar, and a Panzer Grenadier squad is firing on them too. So this is clearly going to be the main push to try and break my right flank. I retasked my 25 pounders to target the Panzer Grenadiers, but the squad's able to move into cover behind the trees. In the centre, the half-track begins moving forward, but the Crusader, I think, is able to get a bead on it and takes it out. Another Panther has arrived on the left, and it's on a bit of a suicidal push up the road, and it pushes forward to a point where it's able to see the Honey Stewart, and it stops there and takes it out. On the right, the Panzer Grenadiers have kept pushing into the trees, but their morale is broken by the continued fire from the 25 pounders, and eventually it surrenders to the two men remaining in my rifle squad. And on the right, I'm trying to push my 17 pounder through the orchard to get into position on the two German tanks. It does manage to get line of sight on the Panzer IV, and it's able to take the Panzer IV out just as the Panther begins to move forward. So I begin moving the 17 pounder, but then the Panther comes into line of sight. I managed to break the Panther's tracks and then take it out with the next shot. So I can almost breathe easy again. So I bring in a Typhoon over on the left to deal with the Panther there. And as usual, it's suppressed and forced to fall back. And I have track moving up the road there behind the Panther. It's engaged by my Churchill and taken out. And the Churchill then pushes on to try and keep the pressure on the Panther and make sure it continues to fall back. So this Churchill just keeps moving up, keeps the pressure on that Panther, and effectively keeps out the rest of the fight. There's another Panzer IV comes in on the right on the main road, and it goes on a pretty reckless charge, bypassing my infantry. And again, it seems to be heading for my artillery, where I've now brought up a couple of Priest self-propelled guns. So completely unsupported. I think this is a last do-or-die attempt by the German commander. The Panzer just pushes right past my infantry. And meanwhile I get my artillery to target the German artillery park. And then when the Panzer comes in line of sight, 17 pounder over in the trees, it's taken out. And you can see with that tank taken out, the Germans don't have much left. They've got a couple of tanks on the left, that's the only real forces they have. So my opponent Luciferum chooses to surrender. So overall, pleased with how that battle went. I could have been a bit more aggressive sometimes, for example against the MG42 in the Chateau or against the infantry out in the left flank, but overall I believe I kept good control of the battle. I was able to limit the effectiveness of the German Panthers, generally dealt well with his armour, and managed to put in place some of the lessons I picked up in my last battle. So I think I sort of shepherded my forces well, and kept them back out of harm's way when I could, and sent them forward when I had overpowering strength. So hope you've enjoyed this battle. Please leave me a comment and rate the video as well, and subscribe if you haven't already done that, and hope to see you again in the next part. Cheers.